2,617 times is the average number of times a modern individual touches their smartphone every single day. 80% of those people execute this exact action within the first 10 minutes of opening their eyes in the morning. Are you truly aware that your consciousness has been completely hijacked by digital design? Or are you still pretending to be the absolute master of your own attention? What if this constant state of scattering is the exact reason why your biggest personal breakthroughs remain permanently out of reach? The definitive reality is that this daily frustration is not a simple failure of your personal willpower. The contemporary digital landscape is intentionally engineered as a biological casino designed to hold your mind captive and force you to put the algorithm first. I spent months trapped in a destructive cycle where my first waking action was opening my financial dashboards and social analytics. This immediate digital plunge delivered a toxic rush of stress that kept my heart rate elevated and left my spirit entirely bankrupt before noon. I frequently doubted myself during that dark period and questioned whether dedicating my first moments to the Supreme Creator could actually pay my mounting bills. I wondered if this spiritual discipline was just a form of psychological escapism to avoid the harsh demands of reality. But when you continue to operate from a place of panic, you ensure that survival anxiety remains the primary driver of your life. To shatter this invisible prison, you must undergo a complete and radical restructuring of your internal priority system. Reordering your primary focus is not a rigid moral obligation or a traditional religious duty. It is a profound psychological liberation that extracts your brain from a chronic survival mode and enters a state of absolute strategic clarity. When you evaluate the structural psychology of historical disciples, like Simon Peter or Matthew the tax collector, you observe a deeper transformation. These individuals did not simply change their daily professions or modify their schedules. They completely demolished their old cognitive navigation systems, which were heavily bound by the primal fear of scarcity and intense societal validation. Putting the divine creator first does not represent a lazy avoidance of your duties or a lack of personal responsibility toward your life. It is the singular proven methodology to completely recalibrate your internal decision-making compass. The moment I chose to stop my frantic early morning hustle to prioritize this sacred transcendent connection, I witnessed a miraculous shift. My subsequent professional decisions became remarkably focused and began yielding long-term sustainable value rather than short-term superficial profits. Your defensive human ego will aggressively rebel during this process and tell you that if you slow down, your rivals will instantly outrun you. But real experience proves that sprinting blindly in a state of panic only accelerates your inevitable collision with a cliff. Moving with a composed, centered mind is the only authentic mechanism to achieve absolute dominion over your path. When your internal priorities are accurately anchored, your neural pathways automatically activate an elevated energetic state that this physical world can never provide. This profound realignment seamlessly prepares your consciousness to receive a counterintuitive internal peace that remains completely impenetrable to environmental storms. Authentic transcendent peace does not represent the convenient absence of external life storms. It is an unshakable internal architecture constructed so securely that no amount of environmental pressure can puncture your focus. When you examine the historical case study of Daniel, you discover the ultimate validation of this defensive system. His strict discipline of engaging in prayer 3 times every single day during an active royal ban was not an act of petty stubbornness. It was a strategic decision to completely disconnect from the panic frequency of a corrupt court and synchronize with the frequency of supreme protection. Experiencing this divine peace functions like an advanced cognitive shield that prevents your mind from being assimilated by the chaotic crowd. I faced an overwhelming professional crisis last year when a major operational failure threatened to destroy my entire business reputation. Instead of immediately reacting with instinctual anger or paralyzing panic, I chose to step back and anchor my mind in sacred stillness. That single decision to put the spiritual connection first cleared the mental fog and allowed a brilliant counter-strategy to emerge, which salvaged the entire situation. Your internal doubt will frequently challenge this practice and ask how a moment of quiet peace can possibly pay your mounting bills. The definitive answer is that while peace does not magically erase your financial documents, it completely prevents those documents from suffocating your logical capacity. To maintain this internal fortress over the duration of your 30-day challenge, you cannot permit hidden toxic forces to continuously manipulate you from within. You must immediately initiate a ruthless campaign to identify and eliminate the invisible idols dominating your heart. Retaining an unshakable internal peace requires you to thoroughly cleanse your inner environment of hidden destructive dynamics. You must initiate a definitive behavioral campaign to identify and dismantle the invisible idols operating within your heart. From a strict cognitive perspective, an idol represents any short-term artificial reward loop or dopamine trap that you rely on to mask internal emptiness. The compelling biographical account of the wealthy young ruler offers a precise diagnostic illustration of this mental prison. This influential individual possessed an elite moral reputation, maintained structural discipline, and displayed genuine respect toward the teacher. But the exact moment he was challenged to sever his attachment to his vast possessions, he abandoned the path in deep sorrow. This tragic outcome occurred because his financial accumulation had quietly transitioned into his primary cognitive operating system. Dismantling these internal idols is not a soft sentimental exercise, but an incredibly painful surgical extraction of a psychological tumor. I chose to confront my own primary addiction last year by completely disconnecting from my audience growth metrics and online validation channels. I deliberately disabled my real-time performance monitors to prioritize the core substance of my message over superficial praise. My internal insecurity immediately screamed in terror and falsely warned me that this separation would destroy my market relevance and cause financial ruin. My revenue patterns did experience a temporary stagnation during that specific period of radical digital isolation. But the absolute psychological liberty I extracted from that intense process rescued my spirit from a catastrophic burnout. When you successfully eviscerate these artificial gods, you create a clean, expansive territory inside your consciousness. This newly liberated internal space allows you to construct an elite cognitive strength which functions beyond volatile emotional states. When you clear your interior landscape of these artificial distractions, you allow a superior form of processing to take root. You must learn to redefine mature faith, not as a flighty romantic feeling, but as a rigorous cognitive muscle developed through decisions that actively contradict your temporary emotional states. The deep historical journey of Abraham offers the ultimate blueprint for this non-emotional operational framework. When he was instructed to abandon his established homeland, he did not receive a detailed logistical map or a calculated guarantee of success. He possessed only a singular vertical commitment and an unyielding execution of obedience, which effectively turned his conviction into an active reality-shaping force. Adult faith requires you to maintain precise execution even on the exact days when you feel completely hollow and emotionally bankrupt. I remember multiple mornings during my 30-day experiment when I woke up with a heavy heart, total mental exhaustion, and zero spiritual sensation. Every internal impulse urged me to abandon my routine, sleep in, and ignore my structural boundaries. I forced my physical body to my knees anyway and executed my spiritual disciplines in a state of absolute emotional numbness. Your analytical ego will immediately attack this consistency and label your emotionless practice as a form of empty hypocrisy. But the biological truth is that a physical muscle never grows when you only exercise during moments of peak comfort. It expands exclusively when you force it to failure under heavy resistance while your nerves are screaming for a rest. This consistent execution above volatile feelings is the exact mechanism that fortifies your core. It is this precise operational stability that successfully propels your consciousness into the final evolutionary stage of this 30-day challenge. You are now fully prepared to witness a complete and total restructuring of your personal identity architecture. Committing to this supreme positioning for 30 consecutive days triggers a powerful psychological domino effect across your existence. It does not simply modify a few isolated behaviors or patch over superficial flaws in your lifestyle. This consistent alignment executes a total systemic overhaul of your core identity architecture from the inside out. When you evaluate the radical biographical transition of Saul of Tarsus into the Apostle Paul, you observe this mechanism perfectly. This was not a minor behavioral adjustments or a simple redirection of his personal career path. It was a complete and absolute restructuring of his entire neural network, which transformed a violent hunter into an elite builder of history. Authentic long-term transformation never occurs by desperately trying to fix your external habits with brute force. It happens exclusively when you change your primary identity and rewrite the foundational script of who you are. As I reached the final stages of my own 30-day experiment, I observed a sequence of automated changes in my daily conduct. My historic tendencies towards sudden explosive anger vanished entirely, and my personal boundaries against toxic social environments established themselves naturally. An entirely new version of my persona emerged as an organic inevitability, displaying a calm, deep, and structured authority over my affairs. Your analytical skepticism will immediately challenge this state and ask if this internal rewrite can actually endure once the 30-day constraint expires. The definitive psychological answer is that once your consciousness experiences the exquisite taste of absolute spiritual liberty, you can never volunteer to become a slave to low-level impulses again. You will consciously refuse to shrink your perspective back into the digital prison because your expanded identity cannot fit inside those old chains. Executing this supreme prioritizing system for 30 consecutive days is not a temporary trial or a brief short-term challenge. It is an intentional entry point into a permanently optimized and victorious lifestyle. When you establish the divine creator as the absolute center of your daily operations, every remaining fragment of your existence naturally sequences into its rightful position. Thank you deeply for dedicating your incredibly valuable time to watching this unconventional video today. If this profound analytical perspective has delivered authentic value to your personal journey, please subscribe to the channel right now to join our elite spiritual tribe.